Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by learning to develop yourself, your skills, your network, and more. I'm Brian, your host. Today on the Develop Yourself podcast, I have a very special guest, Brooke Sweedar. You perhaps know her from LinkedIn, where she writes a ton of really excellent content. She recently graduated from a coding bootcamp, and today I want to talk to her about the mindset it takes to actually be successful while in a program like a boot camp. Afterwards, a little bit about her content creation strategy and general advice she'd give to people out there who are on the job hunt as she's living through it right now. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Brian, for having me. I've been a big fan for a long time, and I so appreciate you making the time to have me on today.
Oh, I could say the same to you. I follow you like I'm sure a lot of people do. And you have such good content out there, which I can't wait to talk to you about. I've been seeing you all over LinkedIn. You've really blown up. How many followers are you at right now? Just curious.
Yeah, I'm at really close to like 14,700 right now.
Holy
So I'm
moly.
getting close to the 15K mark. It's exciting. I'm so excited.
That is really exciting. I feel like all my growth happened within the last year and a half or so like that. But it took me a really long time to get to like 15,000 or even 10,000. I was like, whoa, this is nuts. Mm-hmm. And to see you've had a pretty meteoric rise, which is really cool. Yeah,
it has been cool because I started posting just this year towards the end of February.
Whoa, that's even okay. Yeah, we got to talk about that because I need some tips myself. Before we get into all that, for those that don't know you, you recently graduated from an online coding bootcamp, right?
Yes. I did a full stack web development program. It was 6 months long, and I started it in January, and I graduated in July. And then I took a little bit of I didn't jump right into the job market. I took a little bit of time just for myself, but now I am active in my job search.
Cool. Yeah. So you're going through a lot of the same issues, struggles that I'm sure a lot of people are going through, they've read about. And I really want to get your take on it because, you know, I switched into software from like a whole different life back when I was about 30. And it was tough to get in. And now I feel like I'm so kind of far away that sometimes it's hard for me to get a really good like view on what the reality is now. Because I'm like, me having 10 plus years of experience, my experience is just going to be different than yours. So I love hearing like what people like you are seeing on the job market. But what led you to do this career switch? What were you doing before?
Right. So I've had an extensive career as an executive recruiter, and this was actually in the manufacturing space here, focused here on companies in the United States. So it was great. And actually, I'm still currently employed, by the way, and I'm in a really good position. I work for a great company. It's family owned, so that changes the dynamic. And to be honest, a big part of why I stayed for so long is because I love the people that I work with. It's been such a great culture fit. But the reality is that I've capped out where I'm at. There's no more upward mobility at my current position. So I just, and life certainly isn't getting any cheaper. So I was like, okay, I could easily go be a recruiter somewhere else. I have all the skills. I know what I'm doing. But it was something like I've been with them for so long and I loved the journey. I loved the work, but I didn't necessarily feel like, oh, I'm just so passionate about recruiting itself. That was like, the dream, I guess. And I'd been sort of dabbling with code for, I'll say about a year and a half before I decided to. Yeah. So I wasn't a total stranger, but I wasn't gung ho either. Like it was just very much spare time. This is kind of interesting to me. And so I really had to think about it because I was like, okay, if I want to do something different, no matter what I choose, I'm going to be starting from scratch, right? If I decide to leave the recruiting industry. So I really thought about it. And I did a lot of research, and it was scary because, especially on platforms like Reddit, and
oh my God, the worst place to get.
It's the worst. But I went there and I braved through it. Don't do that, guys. Don't go to Reddit.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't do it. But just to sort of research and see like what the salaries were. So I also don't have a formal college degree. So then I was thinking, well, should I go back to school? Really, what are my options here? And I ended up deciding that I wanted to do the boot camp route because I already had been sort of doing the self-teaching and I just wasn't consistent. And I felt overwhelmed with all of the choices, the tutorials, all the languages, which one should I choose?
Which one do you choose? Yeah.
And everyone has a different opinion and they all think that they're correct, and that's fine. So I felt for me that having a sort of structured setting that just pushed me, right? Where I had deadlines, I just had to complete the task and then
Yep.
just get through it was the best choice for me.
That makes a ton of sense. I think that was kind of leading to my next question, which is like, if you could teach yourself, which people always ask, I'm like, you could teach yourself all sorts of stuff. You could
Sure.
teach yourself how to fix a car, paint a house, get into shape, but we hire personal trainers or go to online programs or go to schools, whether you want to learn how to be a trucker or you want to
Right.
learn how to be a barber, you're likely going to pay somebody if time is of the essence, or if you just want to get a clear path to the final destination, which is what it sounds like you decided to do, which made sense for you, right? In this case.
Absolutely.
Well,
I really did my research too with picking a boot camp.
mhm.
And so, a lot of my followers, of course, not all, but a good chunk of them are either self-taught developers or boot camp, either
Yep.
students or grads. And I felt so bad because so I had a positive boot camp experience, but I've spoken to many people who have not, who felt like they wasted thousands of dollars, all this time, just didn't get a proper ROI. Or I've definitely also spoken to people where maybe those boot camps promised certain results, like, oh, we guarantee,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm like, well, okay. So I would always recommend avoiding that. That's just not realistic. So I felt that I made a good choice. I definitely did my research, but I also do think though boot camps are not for everybody. Like I had
Yeah.
some experience with code,
Hmm.
and very few of my boot camp classmates actually ended up graduating, made it to the finish line. And I think some of them liked the idea of breaking into tech. I think that there's something very sexy about that, and it's
Yeah,
really
for
cool.
sure.
There's all this money in tech, and
Hmm.
it's the future, and
The
all of that
options, yeah.
is true.
Flexibility, yeah.
Yeah, but there's so much more to it too, and it is tough. It's very tough.
It's really tough. I think that's the biggest thing that people kind of forget. Like a lot of boot camps sell you on this idea, like, oh, break in, it's so easy, and
Mhm.
anybody can learn how to code, and you're gonna get like $200,000. And I'm like, it's kind of easy to learn how to code a little bit, like
Right,
HTML and CSS, like these kind of small blocks. You hit that mountain of JavaScript, and you're like, oh, this is tough. And then it's like React or something. Oh, this is tough. Then backend, then deployments, and it just piles up. And it's still fun, I think. Like I'm
right.
sure you do too. There's a lot of just joy in learning how to code. What are some things that you wish you had known before joining a?
I think, even though like I said, had scratched the surface with code, and for me, by the way, that meant basic HTML and CSS, just for some
Yeah,
context. That's all I'd
yeah,
done,
for sure.
which is fine. And even though I'm a very research oriented person, I just did not realize how much I did not know until about 3 weeks into my boot camp, because I remember the
Okay.
first couple weeks I was feeling super confident. I was like, I got this. And then and then all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, what is this? And just how deep it goes, I guess.
Hmm.
And I think that I did kind of freak out a little bit. There was a point where I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Can I do this? And
Yeah.
I did. I made it through it. I'm very proud of that. I made good grades. I graduated. Oh, it felt that was like the best feeling ever. Um, but also too, like you said, with learning how to code, yes, I agree. You can learn, but really the time, the mental focus that's required to really dive deep on a project and push through, I didn't realize how much time that was going to take.
Oh
I
yeah.
I knew I was going to have the classes, and for me that was, well, again, still employed, right? So working my full-time job, and then evening classes, 3 evenings a week, 3.5 hours each. And that was a lot, but then I
Yeah.
still had homework and I still had projects. And then I was also doing stuff on LinkedIn. Like,
Oh my
Brian, when
God.
I say I had no life, like, and no sleep for 6 months, that is not an exaggeration. Because I had to spend every spare second to keep up. Because if I fell behind, I knew I wasn't going to make it, to be honest, because we would cover one thing and then the
Hmm.
next lesson, we're moving on to something else. So, there
It
was
builds on
very
each
little
other.
wiggle
Yeah. How did you do? This is the biggest issue I see with most people. Like
room.
I own a coding program too, and the thing we notice and we see and we're trying to attack and like add more material for, just kind of help people out, is like the mindset thing. I almost hate saying mindset because it sounds a little fluffy, But it's true. Like if before you get into one of these programs, like you have to know how to organize a schedule. You have to know how to stick to it. You have to know that you're going to feel deflated and beat down sometimes, and you're going to get over it, or you're going to have to know how to reach out for help.
Yes.
How did you come in here? Did you already have a game plan, a plan of attack before you entered the program, or was this something you kind of figured out as you're going through it? Hey, I hope you're enjoying this episode, and if you're interested in becoming a software developer, learning how to build complex software, and actually get hired, join me at hawttttt.io. If you're serious about joining, just schedule a call with me by clicking the link in the show notes below.
It definitely took some trial and error, but I will say too, though, I will give myself some credit. I'm a very type A person, so I'm
Mm,
naturally more organized. Not
yeah,
everybody is. So like, I like structure. I'm
not shocked.
yeah, got my calendar. Everything's in order, so that helps. I'm not gonna lie. I like that I am that way because I do think it really helps me with all that I am doing. But one thing with the mindset specifically was that helped me so much was when I started posting on LinkedIn. And that is because I only decided to do it in the first place for accountability at first. Cause I was like, okay, because in my mind, I was like, if someone else
Yeah.
knows that I'm doing
Uh-huh.
this beyond my little
Right.
small cohort in my boot camp, but if the world sees that, okay, I've made this announcement and I've decided I can't fail.
You
I
get that
can't
pressure.
embarrass myself
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
right.
Like that's
Hmm.
no, my pride could never. So that was huge for me.
I feel you. That's a really good one. We have this program called Dev 30, which is going on right now. It's like
Mhm.
a mini program. If you want to go into Parsity, you could, or you want to go somewhere else, whatever. And it's about learning JavaScript. That's kind of how we get people in, kind of a marketing tactic, if I'm being completely honest. But a lot of it's like posting on LinkedIn, like
Yeah.
learning how to create a schedule, like doing these things that are going to help you succeed, whether you go to Parsity or whatever boot camp is out there. But the posting on LinkedIn thing is what I see as a big, big thing because then people do create that accountability and they're starting to like say, okay, you post enough, and then you kind of make it a habit and you continue with it. And you've continued with it, and it's kind of morphed into its own thing. I mean, you got like brand deals and stuff going on, right?
It's honestly become like a third job.
Crazy.
Seriously. And yeah, so content creation was never the goal or
Yeah, right.
yeah, being like a linked influencer, whatever you want to call it. That was never my intent. But I just was very public with my journey, and I do think it resonated with a lot of people because there are so many people who are doing what I'm doing. But I was just being more public than I think most others at the level, right, that I was at. And but it resonated with people. And then I had people rooting for me and in
Hmm.
my corner, which was amazing. And also, to be honest, it really helped me because, like I said, I felt like I was running on E for a while. And just because, like, when I say I had no life and I was just so consumed with doing this and so
Yeah.
determined, and I would get frustrated because there were things that were difficult and that I did not understand. There was a lot of new stuff,
Hmm.
but I had now other friends on LinkedIn who offered me help or just like encouragement, like, other boot camp grads too. That was huge because then they were like, oh, I remember that. Like, that's normal. And it
Okay.
made me feel less
That's cool.
crazy.
Yeah. That's a
So that,
really good point. These are really, really solid points that I never thought. I thought you did get on LinkedIn with the intention of like kind of blowing up. I didn't realize that it started off as is pure like accountability and you just kind of blown up. But that's the cool thing because you've been really open and honest and you actually just write cool, funny stuff. I definitely want to get into like your whole content creation process because I find that really interesting. I'm curious if you have a process, but are there any things like you said you're type A that you had a schedule that you kind of put together? What are some things you could like tell people listening to this? Like, hey, here's some things I would do. Like, here's some exact tips I would do to like organize your life or schedule so you can do well in a coding boot camp program.
right. So I implement what I call time boxing. I'm sure there are other phrases for it. I just may not know what they
Hmm.
are, but I think it's best like either in the evenings, which is what I do, or like at the end or start of a week, have your calendar out in front of you, whether you use a physical one or something online. I use Google Calendar. It's a lifesaver for me, and it's free and it alerts me 10 minutes before I have anything going on all my
Yep.
devices. So that's really helpful. And map out your week. If you have your job, literally put that in the hours that you're working. And for me, especially whenever I was starting out on LinkedIn, I had 2 windows a day that I would dedicate to being on LinkedIn for 30 minutes. And one was in the morning and one was in the afternoon. So
Oh,
I
okay.
I literally put that in my calendar because I was like, okay, I'm
Super
going to
smart.
post, I'm going to make connections because at the time my goal was to reach 500 connections. That was like
Yeah.
my threshold, which is a really good
Yep.
starting point
It's a
for
really good
anybody.
start for sure.
Exactly. So I did that. And for me, I even took it further because like I can get so consumed and busy and I like to work. Like I'm a hustler, but I
Hmm.
will forget to eat sometimes. So for me, I literally have to be like, go drink some water, like a little,
Like
just a little.
scheduling your lunch breaks and like
I have
personal
to.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then now of course it's so funny because I thought that things would settle after my boot camp and in some ways they have, like the pressure because
Hmm.
now I don't have such harsh deadlines, but I'm just as busy as ever because thankfully my LinkedIn stuff has grown so much that now I'm very fortunate to be doing all of these really cool business opportunities,
Yeah.
having these amazing just coffee chats with some of the coolest people in business and in tech, and then also doing these collaborations, which I love. Like I'm obsessed with doing them. I have so much fun. They open so many doors, and I do think I'm very happy to say that I do feel that a lot of my followers do find value in the
Yeah.
content I put out, and that feels
Hmm.
good.
Yeah. I think we need more people that are newer talking about it because I can only tell you like what I'm seeing through people at Parsity, for example, or through my old experience. And it's just like it's a memory now. I don't really know what it's like. I was on the job hunt earlier this year and it's just different. It's different than, I mean, my advice is what I think will work and what I've seen work for people, but I'm not living through it right now. And I think it's way more interesting to hear from people that are like in it right now in the trenches, going
Right.
through this stuff, you know? So you went to the coding boot camp, graduated, did really well, and now you're out and you are a LinkedIn influencer, content creator, whatever you want to call it. What is your process for creating your posts? Because your posts get a lot of traction and they're so good that people actually want to pay you to post about them. So, how do you brainstorm these things and come up with these? I get the feeling that you're not just freestyling it. I get the feeling you probably have some sort of method to the madness.
Um. Yes and no. Honestly, I can't say I have any sort of master plan except that I okay, so my best friend for my content creation ideas is the Notes app on my phone. If
Oh yeah.
anything comes to my mind at any time, like I will wake up at this point in the middle of the night
Hmm.
sometimes, which might
Oh
sound
yeah. I'll be
crazy.
like, Siri, remind me to do this. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'll just pop over, throw it up on my notes, and I write everything down. Whether I don't think too hard about it, as I guess what I'm saying. Like I don't sit and go,
Okay.
"Is this actually a good idea?" It's just if it comes to me, I'm going to write it down, and when I revisit it, maybe it does suck, right? Maybe it's
Yeah.
something I never use. But also sometimes and I also never delete anything from it. I know that's weird too because I'll scroll and sometimes like now I'll connect the dots
Hmm.
on something I thought of or forgot about a month ago even. So it looks like the scrawlings of a madman. And I hope no one ever sees it because it's probably a weird thing to witness, but it's so for my content creation ideas, that and also a combination of I do spend a good amount of time engaging on other people's content on LinkedIn. I have such an
Yeah.
amazing network of like actual friends now at this point
Yeah. Yeah.
who also put out really good content. So I'm often inspired by other people too. You know, seeing something that just resonates with me or that I feel like I can give my own perspective on, or even just on the tech side. Now I want to try this in the next thing that I
Oh
decide
yeah.
to build. So
Oh, that's really cool. So Brooke, you and I have a very similar process. I come up with ideas, like I'll go to the gym or something, and like my
yeah.
brain will be all fired up, and then I'll just yell into Sierra like, "Oh, Sierra, remind me to write a post about like why TypeScript sucks," and then I'll like, and sometimes like this is a brilliant idea. This is gonna be great, and then I'll go home and read it. And I'm like, "Oh, that sucks. I don't want to write that." And
Sure.
then I'll write that. I have like hundreds of little notes in my phone like that, and it's so funny that you do the same thing, which makes sense because I think we have all these little ideas that crop up during the day, whatever our like creative time is, then we write them out. Like I write all my posts usually on Sundays. And then I'll like write a bunch of drafts and then I'll kind of think, okay, and then like the day of I'll think, oh, what do I want to post today? And I'll do the
Okay.
same thing. I'll read from you or Ryan Talbert or
I
John
love
Cricket. Yeah, Ryan's really good. If you're not following Ryan Talbert, also, by the way, shout out to him. He's super funny and writes a lot of hot takes about JavaScript and really useful stuff too.
Yeah, he
And I'll
does.
see what you post, and I'm like, oh, this is really good. I should start stealing from some of this stuff, and I'll borrow bits and pieces from other people out there. Now, to a lot of people, this sounds like, oh, I would never do that. I'm way too shy. I don't want to write about I don't want to write about what I'm doing online. How did you get over that? How did you get over that initial fear, if you had any? And what would you suggest people do if they're nervous about learning in public?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, okay, so we're talking here. I'm at the point I'm at now, but just a super quick reminder that when I started from zero, just absolutely like everybody else. And I think that that's really
Yep.
important to reiterate. And I am a very introverted person. And before I started posting on LinkedIn, I was never the social media person. I just wasn't. Like, I had a Facebook, didn't really use it. Like, that just wasn't my thing. Right?
Okay.
I was a lurker on pretty much
Interesting.
every platform. And I think a lot of people are. So
Yeah.
again, for me, when I started on LinkedIn, I knew I was breaking into an industry where I knew nobody. And if I
Hmm.
wanted a shot at getting a job as a stranger that's doing what a lot of other people were doing, the same thing, like I had to be different somehow. And
Hmm.
so again, it was reach 500 connections, post about what I'm doing, and maybe it'll get to a point where someone sees it and wants to hire me. Like, those two things were my main motivation for doing any of this. And that hasn't really changed because I'm still on my search. So I'm still like, hey,
Hmm. Yeah.
someone hire me. And yeah, so I think you just have to look at what is your end goal. What is it going to take to get there? I mean, growth is uncomfortable, and I wish I could be like, oh, it's so easy. It's not. And even though now I'm doing these cool collaborations, that's not for everybody. But to be
Yeah.
honest, if you sat down with Brooke from even just 1 year ago today, like, she would not recognize the Brooke that's sitting here talking to you, and
That is
that's
really cool.
it is cool. I'm very proud of that. But it was scary, and I was very self-conscious. And also too, like, as a woman, like, I just, the thought of being public and exposing yourself to potentially
Oh,
weird stuff. Like, I've
okay.
always been a little bit paranoid about that, just being very honest. Um,
Yeah. I could imagine. I mean, I never would even think about that.
yeah, yeah. So that was something to,
Have you had any kind of weird interactions online?
yes. Yes. I mean, to be
Oh,
honest, Brian, like,
yeah.
any woman that's remotely active online would give you the same answer, and that's super unfortunate. I'm not trying to be flippant about it. It's just
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
it just is what it is.
Okay. Understood. That makes sense. But
Yeah,
yeah, sorry to hear that. It's so funny because as a dude, I just never have those kinds of. I have people say mean things about tech or whatever, like, oh, that's a stupid
sure.
opinion. But beyond that, nah, nothing else.
Yeah. So it's different. And to be honest too, that's something, one of my favorite things now that I'm get more and more of, and it makes me so happy, is whenever I get DMs from other women who are considering switching to tech or in boot camps, and they're like, man,
Hmm.
I'm the only woman like in my boot camp, or
Yep.
I'm so discouraged. Or they ask me like, hey, how do you deal with getting creepy messages or icky comments and stuff like
Hmm.
that? And for me, I got to be honest, like, my previous career as a recruiter, I actually think equipped me really well because I was working in the manufacturing space. So I was still working
Oh,
with engineers every day, just not in,
okay.
but
Hmm.
like in manufacturing operations. So I've had years of people literally being like, I'm not, like, can I speak to a man? and, and it just gets worse from there. And so it's like, dude, whatever.
Okay.
Like, I,
Okay.
I'm a bit more acclimated to it. I still don't like it.
Yeah, I bet not. Because yeah, let's be honest too. Like tech is super male dominated.
Yeah,
It's like I forget the last statistics in Stack Overflow, but I think it's like less than 10% of all software engineers are women.
sure.
Is that something that you even considered or something you even think about in general? And if so, how have you dealt with that?
For sure. Like I said, to me, it wasn't a surprise. And also, like, even though the stuff I'm doing on public more has definitely gotten me more attention, both good and bad.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I've had to just learn how to navigate that. But what I think was most discouraging to me as I entered into this industry was also hearing the statistics of how many women, once they break into tech, leave really
Oh
quickly
yeah,
because
that's a really bad one too.
yeah, and that's super unfortunate. So I don't know. I think I'm a very competitive person, and so
Hmm.
it's like I will succeed. Like, I will be the woman that doesn't leave. Like, that's a genuine that's just kind of the person that I am. Like, oh, I'll show you kind of thing. Like it's got to be victory. There's no other option.
I like that. And I look on the flip side too. I came into tech, and for people that don't know, I'm half black, half white, and I
Right.
look like, or whatever I look like. I look like whatever. And I'm in a super minority too,
Mhm.
among people in software. And I've always kind of seen that can be either an edge
Right.
or to your detriment, because I told, I remember a woman on my team, was a black woman on the team, and she felt like she was being unfairly singled out at one point. And I said, yeah, I think you are, because here's the reality: you stand out.
Hmm.
So if you stand out anywhere, it's just human tendency that they're going to look at the other and they're going to say, and maybe not even mean to. I don't think that people have bad intentions all the time at all. I do think though that if you naturally stand out, you can use that to your advantage. But it's really hard to be average if you stand out in the room. And I think that a lot of women, I can only assume, must go through that, where they feel like I have to almost be better than people because I'm just naturally already standing out. I'm kind of being looked at with a little bit of suspicion or otherness, and now I have to be better than others. You being a super type A personality and doing all this stuff, I know you're going to do very well and probably stand out for all the right reasons. But for a lot of people, that can add that pressure that I'm sure maybe encourages them to drop out, which kind of sucks.
Yeah, and there were 4 women in my boot camp. We started out with 34 students at the time,
Whoa.
and only
Okay.
13 of us made it to graduation. Like 13 students total. Thankfully, 2 other women did make it to graduation besides me, so I was very proud. But it was amazing to me how many people dropped out late in the game, past the
Really?
refund point. That's what freaked me out, to be honest, Brian, because like, and also too, the program I was doing was, it was a part-time boot camp, versus all day was in
Mm.
the evening. So
Yeah.
all of us, like, I was probably one of the youngest people in the boot camp. I'm 28 for reference, but just saying. So like everyone in there was pretty much working professionals. A lot of them had
Hmm.
families. So
Families.
to be
Yep.
honest, that surprised me because it wasn't a big group of like 18-year-olds, trying to make this decision.
Yeah.
He decided they couldn't handle it. Like these were grown people, and it was like 3-4 months into our 6-month boot camp, they really started dropping out. And I was like, but again, maybe I'm an exception. Like there's, even if I decided I hated this and I never wanted to code again, I'm getting that certificate. Like I'm going to reach the finish line. There is no way I'm leaving this without that piece of paper. It's not happening.
You have I think you're the prototype of what you want. Like when I talk to you, you're the kind of person I'm like, okay, that should be the person I want in this program. But I know from experience, like, whether you are in a workout program or any
Right.
kind of program, like the reality is a lot of people, they can't hack it. And to have that kind of long-term view where you're thinking, okay, I see the future. This is going to take me 6 months of pain, and I'm going to get to this goal at the end of it.
Right.
And if you deviate, I mean, a lot of people just, they can't sustain that kind of thing. How do you sustain motivation? I mean, I don't believe people can really rely on motivation for 6 months. I think they have to rely on what I usually would rely on is routine. How did you maintain that steady state for 6 months and against the odds, honestly? Because when you see that few people graduate, that you're going against the odds. How did you beat that?
Absolutely. You said the magic word, first of all, with consistency. That is
Mm.
absolutely, man, like, because it wasn't easy. And I want to stress that. Like, I'm not sitting here ever in any capacity trying to pretend that it was. It sucked. So I absolutely had days where I found myself, like, as soon as class ended at almost 10 o'clock at night, just being like, it just sucks. Like, I'm so tired, and I know I have all this homework to do, and I feel confused on this concept. So a couple things that also helped me outside of just like focusing on the end goal and reminding myself, like, it is only 6 months. It feels like eternity right now
Hmm.
but it's such a short period of time in the grand scheme of things. And look at what could be, look at what could come from that. So that combined with the fact that I was making friends on LinkedIn with both fellow boot campers and also just more seasoned professionals who kind of just were very kind to me and saw that I was posting stuff and would just go out of their way to send me encouraging messages or just things like, hey, like if I can assist you in any way, like let me know. I'm happy to help. That happened very organically for me. I was not reaching out to them asking them for help.
Hmm.
So that was super cool. That helped. It made me feel less alone. It made me feel more supported and like I could do it, because I just felt like I wasn't the only one experiencing the things that I'm experiencing, if that makes any sense. So
Yeah, totally.
I always recommend to people, especially if they're going to do a boot camp, like do not be an island, because I am convinced I would have had a much harder time if I hadn't been doing everything I was doing on LinkedIn. If it
Hmm.
was just me and my fellow classmates looking at each other on our Zoom call, like, what is this? I don't know what this is. Like, it would have been so much worse, so much worse. And also, too, I set up rewards for myself. So
Oh,
like
smart. Very
I
smart.
thank you. So we would
Yeah.
have landmarks in our boot camp. So like a project would be due by whatever, this date, whatever. So if I did it, like I might get myself really good food delivery or
Hmm.
play video games that Saturday, something. Those are things that incentivize me. So figure out what that is for yourself and set up a little reward program for yourself.
That's a really great idea. And also, I'm reading this book on habits, and that's a big part of creating a habit. It's like you have the cue, and then the important part, the reward,
Right.
because that encourages your brain to develop these grooves that say, hey, do this thing. And then there's a little treat for you at the end of it. And then you create these good patterns that you can also create for like terrible addictions as well. That's a really good way to create a much better one.
Right.
I want to talk about your current state. So people see you on LinkedIn,
Mhm.
right? And you're kind of blowing up there. How has the job search been with your bit of internet fame? It's made a difference. Has it made it harder, easier?
Yeah, so I think it's been a very unique situation for someone in my position. So I've had so much support in my career search. Like, I don't know if you saw this. This was about 2 months ago whenever I started my search, but like I released this really cool kind of movie trailer video.
I did see that. It was really awesome.
Okay, cool. So that was
Yeah.
awesome. And that did really well. People loved it. So I was kind of like,
Yeah.
I'm so delusional, to be honest. I was like, I'm going to get a job in 2 weeks. No, it's
I
okay.
kind
It's
of thought you might too, actually. I was like, okay, she's
I'll
got to
be
get it.
honest,
Yeah.
Brian, like I was really feeling myself like when I was like, "Oh man,
You should have. Yeah. It was awesome.
announce I'm open to work," and just bam, and no, but that's okay. So,
Yeah.
I've had a lot of support, and it did lead to several interviews. And some of the best interviews that I've had have been
Nice.
specifically from my content on LinkedIn. A lot of which
Okay.
has been with startups that, to be honest, they were just too small, either couldn't afford me,
Okay.
or I'm just too junior as far as the technical level
Yeah.
for that kind of hire, and that's fine. It is what it is. Still
Yeah.
make connections, and hey, you never know, right
Fair
down the line.
enough. Yeah, for sure.
So none of it's wasted. But yeah, I will say too, though, in some ways, I almost feel like too, there's kind of a spotlight on me, and I get frustrated because sometimes I'll have people comment or message me and be like, "You still don't have a job," and I'm like, "No,
Oh
thank you
my,
so." And I know
that's
they
a
don't
terrible
mean it
thing to say. Oh,
with
they don't mean it
malice.
like that. Okay, I got you.
They're mean
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I can't believe it, like, no one's hired you yet," and I'm like, "No." I'm trying really hard. Or I've had people be like, "If Brooke's not getting hired, I don't stand a
Then
chance."
it's
And I'm like,
impossible.
that's
Yeah.
not true. So,
Yeah.
that's been weird, to be honest.
Yeah, that's what I thought people could either look at that and be really encouraged, or they might think, "Oh my God, if she's not already hired, then what chance do I possibly stand?" You
Ugh,
know? But I
right.
think, but here's the other thing I think. I mean, just from looking at this and seeing this over the years that I've been doing this, that everybody's mileage will vary. And
Yes.
also, I don't know specifically your criteria for getting a job. You said, "Hey, I had some interviews, not quite the right fit for me." And you
Mhm.
decided, hey, that's not a good fit. And you're taking your time and it sounds like you're trying to find the right place, which makes sense. A lot of people, like myself, I'll take whatever.
Right.
And I don't think that's always the best idea. I really don't. I don't honestly see what the big rush is. If I'm being completely honest with some people, like, oh, I need a job in 2 weeks or 3 months. I'm like, it'll happen. It just may not happen on the timeline you want. What is your criteria for people out there listening that may be
Yeah.
in the
So
hiring spirit?
absolutely. I also just want to preface to like, again, I'm in a very fortunate position. I'm currently employed. I have very good job security. And I always try to be mindful of that when I'm talking about my job search, because there are a lot of people in this industry who are having a really tough time. And we all have bills. We have to make ends meet. You got to do whatever you got to do. So I understand when people are like, somebody hire me, you know?
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, so I always want to be mindful of that. But yes, I'm very fortunate that I do get to choose. I have had opportunities or proposals even for like freelance work. To be honest, because I have a job, that doesn't interest me. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
that makes
So
sense.
I don't want to do it. Power
Yeah.
to freelancing. I think it's great. It just doesn't interest me. So yes, as far as what I'm looking for, I'm seeking a remote opportunity, remote only. Specifically, would be interested in working for a startup, although I am also applying to mid to larger size companies as well, because either way, I'm going to get good experience. But I love the idea of bringing my brand to the table along with my technical skills. And I just think
Hmm.
that that would be very powerful for the right startup. I am very passionate
Huge.
about technology, and I would be super thrilled and honored to talk about why what we are building together as a company is so powerful and why you should be using our product or service to solve your needs. Like the DevRel side of things does interest me, but I also want to code. So that's sort of my angle.
I like that a lot. In DevRel, for people that might not know, developer relations, I believe, and I know that's a fairly new-ish role. But I honestly don't exactly know what it entails. I've seen a few people on like Twitter or LinkedIn that are part of developer relationships, and
Mhm.
includes like the ability to speak the same language as developers. Basically, like, kind of like marketing specifically for developers is kind of how I see it. Is that like an
Yes.
accurate way to describe that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So it basically you have to know what you're saying, right? You have to have the technical capability of communicating with like the engineering team, but then
Hmm.
also like on the client facing side of people who just want it to work, and
Yep.
they don't need the other details. So and to be honest, I think that my recruiting experience has translated well. I've never worked in a manufacturing plant. I can talk to a manufacturing engineer all day. You know what I'm saying about different
Yeah, yeah.
manufacturing operations. Like, so in a weird way, that's translated very well to this. It's like I also am still learning more with my coding experience, but I want to code and then also have that communication capability. And one thing I keep hearing, Brian, from especially more seasoned people in this field is how much that's lacking, like the soft skills in this field and the
Oh,
communication
100%.
capabilities. So that's why I feel like I'm showing up every day when I'm talking about what I'm looking for in my job search. I'm like, hey, just so you know, like if you bring me on, you're also getting all of this. And that's pretty powerful.
I think that's huge. Yeah, that's way more powerful than I think people even consider.
Right.
Because there's a lot of people that know how to code, but there's few people that know how to code and are able to market, are able to communicate well, are able to come in a team and multiply the force of the team, not only
Right.
through technical skills, but through their like quote unquote soft skills. It's funny because soft skills tend to be some of the hardest skills for software engineers to learn. It's the reason
Sure.
why a lot of developers get in. They find, okay, I'm a junior engineer. I'm doing okay. Mid level, doing okay. And they find they hit a ceiling pretty quickly because
Yes.
they're missing this communication piece. Like I was definitely missing this and I hit that ceiling and I was like, well, damn, why am I getting passed over for, either interviews or not getting leveled correctly and just not feeling like I had much room to grow. And I realized it's because you can't just be in your code hole all day. Coding
Mm.
gets significantly less important the further in your career that you move. A CTO doesn't know about React or JavaScript. They don't really care as much. They care more about the larger picture and business context. Before I let you go, it's been really great talking with you, and I really appreciate you being super open and candid about your experience and what you're doing and really practical tips for people. I got to ask you some hot takes
Yeah.
before I let you go.
Let's
Cool.
go.
Let's do it. Twitter versus LinkedIn.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I don't like Twitter. I never have. You guys are mean on Twitter. I'm sure
They
there's
are.
nice
They're so
too,
mean.
but I'm like, oh, I can't. Listen, LinkedIn definitely has a little bit of a bubble that I
For
prefer.
sure.
I
Yeah.
feel like I go there and I meet friends.
Yep.
So no, I'll pass on Twitter.
Okay. Yep. Fair enough. I think it's because the anonymity tends to ruin
Yeah,
tends to ruin it.
I agree with that
Well,
too.
yeah. TypeScript versus JavaScript.
Oh man, so I'm in the trenches with learning TypeScript right now, and I'm actually really enjoying it. By the way,
Yeah, that's awesome.
and I think I'm so glad that I started with JavaScript because I feel like
Hmm.
the transition is probably one of the easiest versus probably like having another language as my basis and then transitioning into TypeScript. I still think I like JavaScript better. But I
Me
can
too.
see
Me too.
how on a larger project, TypeScript might make more sense. So I don't know, both, but JavaScript. If I had to pick one, still JavaScript.
I'm way late to the TypeScript party. I'm using it finally, like professionally, like nonstop now at the startup where I'm at, and it's been my first like full on, like only using TypeScript, nothing else. And I finally see after months now, I'm like, okay, now I get why people use this because it is really helpful on a small team. Like we don't have a lot of tests, and
Yeah.
TypeScript catches a ton of stuff
Mhm.
that I normally wouldn't have caught using strictly JavaScript.
Right.
But yeah, I'm still not 100%. I don't know if I'd use it personally for my projects that I'm doing, you know?
Sure.
React versus other frameworks. If you've used any other frameworks.
I love React. I love React. I worked with Vue a little bit, and actually, I've had some really interesting conversations with some people in tech about Flutter. And I've not
Yeah.
worked with Flutter, but it seems cool. So I do want to start adding and playing around with that and add that to my arsenal too.
Okay, that's a really good one. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's for mobile development if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, cool. And lastly, JavaScript versus other languages.
So that's the thing. It's like, so my boot camp taught JavaScript. And
Yep.
the main reason why I even started learning TypeScript was because honestly, a lot of job descriptions are saying, hey, do you have TypeScript experience? And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, so
Yeah.
I guess I'm going to learn TypeScript.
Hmm.
And I have not ventured out beyond. And that's mainly because it's so weird because I feel like this period of time has gone very fast, but also I've really only been in the tech space since January. You know what I'm
Oh
saying?
wow,
So
that's nuts. Yeah.
it is crazy. Like in some ways, it feels like I've been here because it feels like home, right? And I've done so
Yeah.
much in such a short period of time. But I've tried to be very disciplined with not spreading myself too thin and wasting my time on stuff that doesn't matter. I'm trying to get like a deep understanding, right,
Hmm.
of getting very comfortable with JavaScript and React, and then transitioning into learning TypeScript because I know it's helping me in my job search. And I've like got my blinders on,
Yep.
so I haven't even dabbled with anything else.
That makes perfect sense. You're doing the right stuff because
Right.
what I see a lot of people do is they get that Swiss Army knife
Yeah.
developer tendency where like I'm going to learn Java and C Sharp and Python. Like they're just trying to fill like everything on a job description. I'm like, no one's going to
Yeah.
hire you for that. It's hard to take people seriously if you're like, I know all these. I'm like, no, you don't. There's no way you know all that stuff. I
Sure.
feel like I barely know JavaScript sometimes. I'm like feeling like, that's been after 10 years of using it. Now I finally feel pretty confident. But the first 5, 6, 7 years, I was like kind of shaky.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brooke, thank you so much for talking today. And for people that don't know where to find you, where's the best place to find you?
On LinkedIn.
I knew it.
Absolutely. Follow me on LinkedIn. If you want to have a chat, I do coffee chats all the time with tech professionals at all levels. I really genuinely enjoy them. So, feel free to DM me and ask me.
Wow.
Let's talk.
I'm going to put that in the show notes. I hope you don't regret it.
We'll see what happens, Brian.
We'll see what happens. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Have a good one.
That'll do it for today's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. If you're serious about switching careers and becoming a software developer and building complex software and want to work directly with me and my team, go to parsity.io. And if you want more information, feel free to schedule a chat by just clicking the link in the show notes.